Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Alertus webinar series. My name is Sharice Rowan, Marketing Specialist at Alertus Technologies. During this presentation, Amanda Sassano, Commercial Sales Director, and Joseph Tuck, Sales Engineer, will provide insight on how you can enhance your emergency communication using IP technology solutions. Feel free to submit your questions during the webinar at any time, and they will be addressed during the Q&A session at the end of this presentation. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared with you after today's session. If you have any questions after this presentation, please email marketing@alertus.com. Now I'd like to turn it over to Amanda and Joe.
Thanks, Sharice. So just to start things off, thanks everyone for joining. We'll go through a quick agenda for today's presentation. And like Sharice said, if you have any questions, feel free to fill out the chat and we will address those. Most likely at the end, we have a spot for a Q&A. But today's agenda is really to, one, focus mostly on IP alerting and how you can utilize your existing infrastructure. And the way we're going to do that is really just give you a high-level overview of Alertus, what we kind of specialize in, the challenges that we help organizations overcome when it comes to their unified mass notification approach. Also, the different layers of mass notification is really important in ensuring everyone is notified in a quick and efficient manner. And then also what sets Alertus apart. So really the things that we focus on in every single application that we help our customers work through. Then we'll have a live demonstration. I'll share my webcam and you'll get to see and hear our solution be activated in a lifelike emergency situation. And then we'll address any questions at the end. So who are we here at Alertus? We've been pioneering the facility-based mass notification space for almost over 16 years now. We are headquartered out of the DC, Baltimore area, and also work across all verticals. So anything from large infrastructure to education, manufacturing, healthcare, government, military installations, you name it, we have them as a customer. As you can see, we have over 2,000 of them worldwide. So really any need and can work within each of these environments to help them address the different challenges that they face depending on what mass notification strategy they've implemented and where they have some gaps. So one of the main things that we like to address first is, within mass notification, a lot of different companies have different ways of currently notifying their employees or guests. Maybe they have a PA system or a fire alarm system, or they have a VoIP system. But the reality is that relying on one or maybe two of these methods can leave some gaps. And a lot of the gaps that we come across throughout the different verticals that we work within exist from different locations, multiple buildings, large campus environments, multiple systems to activate, no way of notifying all of those locations at the same time, or notifying them at the same time with different messaging depending on where the emergency is coming out of. Large employee headcount. Typically, whenever it is a larger establishment, the employees are dispersed between locations, so that can be another challenge that we come across. Large facilities, depending on the different verticals of the large facility, it could be a loud environment, could have different challenges throughout moving throughout the building, depending on where they're located. Also, cell phones not being allowed. This is a really common one because we have a lot of customers that maybe they have a personal recipient solution, hitting that personal device with a text and email if there was an emergency. But ultimately, a lot of these establishments either don't allow cell phones or make you turn them off whenever you're within the building. So it can be an effective way of notifying, but ultimately, if that's the only method that you're relying on, some gaps could still exist. The other one is minimal visual alerting endpoints. A lot of the facilities that we work with, they may have an overhead PA system or a voice-enabled fire alarm system, but ultimately on the visual alerting piece, it's really important especially whenever you have guests throughout the facility or also to be ADA compliant, that you have that balance of visual, audible, and personal notifications so you can ensure that everyone is notified in the event of an emergency. And then the real challenge that we come across is how long it does take for them to coordinate an activation. So you may have assets within your facility and checking off some of these boxes, but ultimately it could take up to 30 minutes to coordinate an activation, which ultimately in these life or death situations, that's too long. So how can we simplify that? How can we unify these assets and ensure that everyone's notified within seconds? So like I mentioned, a lot of the organizations that we work with have existing infrastructure. They may have an overhead public address system or a fire alarm system, whether that's voice enabled or just utilized for fire situations. Also outdoor notification, if you have a large campus area, if you have horns or HPSA solutions. Also the personal notification, like I mentioned. So a lot of the organizations that we work with have, if not one, multiple areas within the big circle that they cover, but ultimately nothing's unified, nothing is really simplified, and ultimately it takes a really long time to coordinate an activation. So what we really specialize in is evaluating what assets you have in your facility, and then how we can, like I said, simplify that, unify that notification, and ensure that every one of those assets is notified and leveraged in a matter of seconds, which ultimately will cut down that response time and ultimately save lives. So what we wanted to focus on today specifically is those IP and IT assets that are already sitting within your environment. These are, we'll go through individually and focus on a couple of these and how we can work with them. But one of the big things that we also focus on is leveraging that existing infrastructure and living within your ecosystem. So our solution is a server-based, network-based solution, and implementing it across your IP infrastructure can really give you that additional coverage that you're looking for, which you're also leveraging existing assets all in one swoop. So that cuts down on install, cuts down on cost ultimately, and gives you the ability to really leverage that infrastructure that you've already spent time, money, resources, training on to be utilized in an emergency alerting capacity, not just an everyday kind of business continuity or even just, regular announcements that you make. You can really leverage it in that emergency instance. Next slide really talks about the different layers of mass notification. And so whenever it comes to the definition around mass notification, there is still a lot of gray area with the codes and mandates, but ultimately it really falls within these 4 buckets. And we can help you really address each of these areas with your existing infrastructure. And then if you do have gaps that still exist, we can help in filling those gaps. But within some of the research that we found, whenever you have more than 2 layers of notification in an emergency situation, that effectiveness of your alert goes up by 60%. And you can imagine as you add additional layers on top of that, that percentage continues to increase in the effectiveness. So whenever these emergencies do arise, you really want to have that thought process and already planned out. You want to have a plan in place. You want to have it to where it is that one touch. You don't have to think about it. And it tackles each of these layers so that in an event, no one is left out. If I'm a visitor, I have some visual and audible assets that I can be notified through. If I'm an employee, I have personal and then all the ways that we leverage and notify indoors, as well as outdoors. If I'm on the grounds, maybe I'm in a courtyard area or in the parking lot, I don't have my cell phone out. So all of these things come into play as a different dynamic in how you would respond and how you would want to communicate that out in the event of an emergency. So just to touch on a couple of these things, especially as it refers to the existing infrastructure that you may have. So whenever you are evaluating and looking at different forms of mass notification and what's going to be a good fit for you, Within the facility, we can, one, leverage those existing assets like your digital signage, any PA system or overhead paging, fire alarm interface, and then we have other devices that you can integrate into those, like our text-to-speech technology, to automate that voice message that's delivered throughout the PA or throughout the voice-enabled fire. But then we do have some hardware components that, as we start leveraging that existing infrastructure that you have within your environment, that if gaps still exist, and to tackle that ADA compliancy, we have items like our alert beacons and LED marquees to give you that additional visual notification, and in the event of the alert beacon, also that audible alert. So like you can see, there's a lot of things that we currently and can leverage that you already have implemented, but then we do have some other areas that we can fill in gaps if they still exist. The personal side of mass notification definitely falls into that utilizing your existing IP assets bucket. Things like desktops and laptops, Chromebooks, VoIP notification, tablets. All of these are areas that typically it's a one-to-one relationship with an employee and can fill in that personal notification piece, but also give you that multi-layered approach. So it's not just hitting the desktop. If I'm up from my desk, that's not going to be effective. It's not just hitting the cell phone or just the VoIP phone. So you really want to look at your existing infrastructure, especially on your IP side, because like I mentioned, we live in your environment. It's very easy to deploy, and we can make use of those existing assets that you have that you currently aren't utilizing in an emergency alerting capacity. So on the screen now, there's a snapshot of pretty much all of the existing infrastructure on the IP and network side that we can interface to. Like I already mentioned, the desktop, we're actually going to go through a couple of these slides and dive into each of these a little bit over the next couple slides, but this gives you a good breadth of what we can interface to, and we'll talk about how we do that as we go through these next couple slides. But before that, just to kind of recap on the difference between Alertus and maybe some other mass notification solutions out there, really we focus on these three main pillars of our solution, our values. This really is kind of the core to what we strive to achieve with each of our customers, no matter what the vertical or size of customer. So creating that single point of activation is really where it starts, being able to cut down on the time that it takes to coordinate that message and getting that out as quickly as possible to as many assets as possible. Integration's the second pillar, so being able to leverage your existing infrastructure and really make use of all of the assets that you may have in your environment. And then ultimately filling in the gaps. So like I mentioned, those first two really go hand in hand. And filling in those gaps after we evaluate and utilize your existing infrastructure is really key to giving you that full blanket coverage. And like I mentioned, the one-touch activation is really key. Being able to leverage all of those assets and hit all those assets within seconds is really the key to saving time, saving lives, and really simplifying your process so that there aren't errors that are made in the event of trying to coordinate that activation. Also, when we talk about activation, so especially a single point, that doesn't just mean that there's one button in one room. You really do have the flexibility to implement and design the system to be activated in whatever message that is most appropriate. So if you have a front desk area, maybe you want to utilize our USB panic buttons or software activations. If you have a command and control center, our hardwired, clearly labeled, color-coded emergency buttons are what our customers usually leverage. And then if it's activations through integrations, activations through being able to tie into your fire alarm system and strategically and intelligently communicate that message out across multiple platforms. So there's a lot of flexibility whenever it comes to how we actually or how you would actually activate the Alertus solution and being able to leverage all of those endpoints. Another way is through our Alertus console. This would be open to any organizer or system admin to be able to go in and customize the emergency alerts. But this is really where a lot of the customization, the grouping, all of those things that we can do to strategically target and communicate that message out in an intelligent way. That's really where the brains of this really lies. But even if you have a hardwired panic button, you can still, tailor that through our Alertus console. So now we'll dive into each of the products individually, especially on the IP alerting side. Obviously, desktop is one of our most utilized products. It has a lot of different functionality within it, from the software panic button functionality to acknowledgement, so really tying in real-time reporting for the different emergencies and being able to see how effective what you are implementing or what you have implemented is actually how that's carried out in a real-time emergency. Also, we can activate through a lock screen, as well as take over, notify through a lock screen. So a lot of customization and functionality within the desktop. And like I mentioned, we, server-based, network-based solution, live within your environment as well. So very easy, non-intrusive way to leverage all of that hardware and IP assets that you already have deployed within your infrastructure. So extensions of the desktop notification, you can see quite a few up here, from USB panic buttons, where really it's just a one-touch solution through our software activation, to more press for help type of buttons that would notify a security office or an admin office. If you think about a school environment, if each teacher had this functionality within their classroom, it could notify the front office who the teacher was, what type of emergency it is, and where they're located within seconds. So, that see something, say something mentality really is able to be carried out if you give the employees and give them the tools to carry that out successfully. Also within your infrastructure, we have our mobile apps. We have two different mobile apps, as you can see up here. One is more for the employee or guest. As far as a recipient app, they would receive a push notification, and we do have some incident reporting functionality within that. But the second is our activator app. So this is really for your admin or users who have the ability to activate the system. But both are great in being able to kind of check the box of providing that push notification. But ultimately, it is something that we have two different versions for two completely different purposes. And, if you're out walking around the campus and you either see something, you can hit an incident report through the recipient app. And if, say, I'm the admin, I see that, I can also push out an activation through the activator app. So very user-friendly, very convenient, especially if you're up moving around like most of us are throughout the day, but ultimately can reach that personal device through a push notification. Another IP asset that we can leverage is voice notification. Same type of alerting capabilities as far as being able to notify an employee as the desktop does, within the form of having a visual and audible alert. But ultimately, the voice notification also can be an activation point. which a lot of our customers that are leveraging the VoIP notification really like that functionality. We also have call monitoring available through this. So if you are an admin or command and control, you can be made aware immediately if someone dials 911 within your organization, who that is, where they're located, and then can, if you wanted to swivel a camera around, view what may possibly be going on, and then help to communicate that out. You can most certainly do that. But ultimately, another piece of infrastructure that you've already deployed throughout your enterprise, and we're able to leverage that in an emergency alerting capacity. Our alert beacons are one thing that also sits on the network. So it is maybe not an existing IP device, but definitely a device, IP device that can be utilized within your enterprise. Like I mentioned, it is ADA compliant, has that visual and audible notification, but ultimately the alert beacon is one of the things that really differentiates us from other companies in the fact that this is a proprietary technology deployed across every vertical that we work within. Typically utilized in high traffic areas. It's mostly meant to grab attention and then give direction, but ultimately can be deployed in every room of a building if there's a need. I know we're working with a biotech company right now, to give an example, and they're deploying these in their labs with some intrinsically safe enclosures. So definitely something that they need, that additional notification piece in those strategic areas, and we're working with them to help overcome that challenge that they currently have today. Fire alarm interface. So this is something that every organization has within their facility, and we're able to typically today, in today's world, if a fire alarm is pulled, it's everyone's getting out of the building. But the reality is that different codes or different situations that the panel produces can have a different desired outcome depending on what the incident is and where it's located. So what we're able to do is really take that information, decipher that, and then deliver that information intelligently across your enterprise depending on what the situation is. If it was a smoke detector versus a sprinkler that maybe went off, if it's in the west wing of the building versus the front entrance, you can reroute people or employees, guests in different ways. We have some organizations that actually will, if the panel is triggered, they'll pull up a evacuation plan or their fire evac plan, a picture of that on all the desktop computers so that the employees know exactly what route they're supposed to take. So a lot of creative and strategic things that we can do to ensure that everyone receives that message in an intelligent way, but also very, very quickly and efficiently. Another thing that we can leverage your existing infrastructure through is our text-to-speech module. And essentially what our text-to-speech module does is converts any text that is associated with that alert and convert that into a spoken message. So if you think about it, if there's an incident where someone has to push a button versus a situation where someone has to pick up a microphone and intelligently deliver that message and stay calm, cool, and collected, it could be very challenging. So being able to take that human element out of the equation and ensure that that message is delivered as effectively and efficiently as it can be is really key to having that alert go out successfully and having the people, what actions you want them to take, be clearly communicated in the event of that particular emergency. Another piece of visual notification that we can leverage throughout your infrastructure is digital signage override. So essentially any digital signage that you may have throughout your facility, whether it's in a cafeteria or maybe a common area, entrance, exit, different enterprises we know have these placed in all throughout their facilities. So no matter where it is, we can target that and take that over with an emergency message if there is digital signage in and around your facility. Another thing that we're able to interface with is other technology like access control, cameras. The main way that we do that is through contact closures currently. So we really take pride in being brand agnostic and not proprietary to one company over another, and really integrate with all technology that you may have within your environment. So if you have a badge that's maybe flagged within the system, it closes a contact, we can deliver that message to either security or really wherever within your enterprise you need that to go within seconds. So it's something that if it is a person of high interest or high threat, maybe you want the building to go into lockdown if they're trying to enter. You can really think through the different scenarios, but ultimately it's something that communication needs to get strategically communicated out in a very quick and efficient manner. Other things that we're able to interface with through contact closures are things like different sensors, or maybe ammonia sensors or temperature sensors. There are some temperature controlled areas in different types of facilities that we work within, and someone needs to know immediately if there's a leak or that sensor is triggered. The other thing is the AED cabinets. If they're open, we can notify the person within the facility that needs to be made aware immediately, and they can send help to that specific area. So a lot of flexibility to really help you in intelligently and strategically communicating that message out, no matter if it's a life or death emergency or just general things that you need to be made aware of immediately. So really the advantage in thinking about mass notification in this IP alerting sense are these bullets up here. So obviously leveraging the investments that you've already made throughout your enterprise, being able to unify those and create a single point of activation, providing a layered approach of visual and audible notification, integrating with all of those assets, helps with cost, helps with install, helps with maintaining the system. You already have people in place that are really keeping up with this technology that you have deployed. Very simple for us to work with your IT folks and in your environment to deploy this throughout your IP enterprise, and then ultimately filling in the gaps. So the main thing of creating that unified activation and filling in those gaps to ensure that no one is left out in the event of an emergency is really key to the effectiveness of your mass notification strategy and how you've deployed your technology to date. So I love these data sheets that our marketing folks put together. They really give a good representation of what it would look like if an organization deployed an Alertus solution and what we can leverage. So as you can see on the screen, this is an example of more of like that office environment. We're leveraging areas like the entrances with the visual and audible notification, as well as some panic buttons throughout. Also, the desktop alerting and digital signage override is being leveraged in this, interfacing into their existing fire alarm system, placing LED marquees around to give that additional visual alerting piece. So it really gives a good idea of what a solution would look like if it was deployed in an environment like this. And we have these for pretty much any environment you can think of, but it definitely gives a good representation of what that would look like across your enterprise. And this is what we refer to as our solution overview, and can give you an idea of more of that campus environment, whether it's a corporate campus or educational campus, healthcare campus. But ultimately, if something happens in one location and you need to strategically communicate that to others, we're able to do that very quickly and effectively. So it's not something that, you have a corporate headquarters and then you have maybe 10 other locations. You at corporate would want to know if something happened at one of those locations immediately and not kind of after the fact or on the news, unfortunately. So being able to really give you that enterprise level notification and mass notification solution really makes you more prepared for incidents that could happen, and we're really here to help handhold you through that process of what's going to work best for your enterprise, what that deployment looks like, what items we're able to leverage within your IP infrastructure, and then where are some gaps that still exist so that we can really help to tailor each mass notification solution that we support our customers in deploying. It really is a unique approach based on their challenges and their needs. And go ahead and turn on the webcam. But what you see up on the screen right now, this is our, the big screen. This is our Alertus console. So this is really where any asset that you're leveraging throughout the enterprise, we would have the intelligence behind it starts with our Alertus console, from ways that we group to different user rights for individuals within your organization, different alerting profiles, the different devices that you're leveraging. So this is really where a lot of that on the front end is configured. Obviously, that's us and your teams working together to ensure that it is the look and feel and functionality that you're wanting out of our solution. But then whenever we talk about activating the solution, we look at it as these four buckets. So emergency activations are ones that are the highest threat. It's going to go to all of the devices within your enterprise because it's that severe of an alert. Preset activations, these are more tailored for different types of emergencies. In healthcare, we support them on a lot of their alerts are color coded. So code blue, code purple, code red. We're able to work with them to customize these based on their individual needs and what messaging they need to get out to whom. Custom activation, exactly what it implies, from beginning to end, really customizing that message, what areas are going to be targeted, devices, what it will say, what the behavior would be, but custom from beginning to end. And then we have our desktop premiere activation. So this is solely, the desktop capability, but like I mentioned, the desktop notification is one of our most utilized products, for the reason being that it is within the network already deployed, but also it can be utilized for a lot of non-emergency situations. So if it's we have, at our headquarters, we have one day a week that lunch is provided, notifying everyone with a ticker message that, today's Wednesday, we're having salad and it's in the cafeteria, help yourself, to instances where the IT department's going to be working on the server, so the network's going to be down. So IT doesn't get a bunch of calls or emails. They would send out a desktop notification and can notify everyone. But the beauty of it is that you can also track acknowledgments. So you can't, after the fact, they can't come and say, you never notified us. You have proof that wasn't the case. So just as important as it is to track those acknowledgments within an emergency situation, you can really use them as a leverage or accountability tool in non-emergency situations that you may utilize. So I'm going to go ahead and guessing that everyone can see the demo room that we have here at our headquarters. I believe that on the screen that you're viewing, you can just change back and forth on what screen is bigger and smaller. But ultimately, what you see here is an example of all of the assets that we've went over today. So desktop alerting, this is an alert beacon with a text-to-speech speaker. This is some digital signage, LED marquee, cable TV, another alert beacon, some hardwired panic buttons, fire pull station, our text-to-speech module, and then VoIP notification, and then also our fire alarm panel right here. So I'm going to go ahead and issue out an emergency activation. And I'm going to go with a bomb threat. Already has the text populated. It's going to go to all units. Like I mentioned, it's an emergency alert, so it's very time sensitive. And you can see what devices it's going to hit, a detailed description of those, and then all you do is click on the button.
A bomb threat has been reported on the premises. Please proceed immediately to the nearest available exit and vacate the building. A bomb threat has been reported on the premises. Please proceed immediately to the nearest available exit and vacate the building.
So you can see very quickly after I canceled that alert, it goes back to their original state. And then we always like to recommend best practice after an emergency to issue out an all clear. So we'll go ahead and do that through the same way.
All clear. The emergency condition is over. Return to normal activities.
So I think now we'll go ahead and kick off the question Q&A if anyone has any questions for Joe or myself.
All right. Thank you. We are now beginning the Q&A session of our presentation. If you have a question, please submit them through the chat or question box. Please note if we do not get to your question during the session, a representative will reach out to answer your question directly. A recording of this webinar will also be shared with you after today's presentation. Now let's begin with our first question. How intrusive is the software? Will it block the computer or phone when an alert comes in?
Yeah, so for those that are joining later on, my name is Joe Tuck. I'm one of the sales engineers here with Alertus Technologies. I wanted to address the question of the invasiveness of the Alertus desktop notification. So it's not invasive. There's the ability to acknowledge any of the alerts that come up, but it really depends on the delivery method of the desktop notification. As Amanda addressed earlier, we do have several ways to deliver a desktop notification, one being the traditional full screen takeover. In that case, if an individual has a particular workflow on their workstation at that time, they have the ability to simply acknowledge that message and go back to their workflow. That acknowledgement gets sent back to the Alertus server and can be kept and recorded for trend analysis. For the other ways to send out an alert message on the desktop, we have the scrolling ticker, which can be displayed on the top or bottom of the screen, and also can be anchored to a certain corner and only displayed on part of the screen as well. That, with the full screen desktop takeover, can also be acknowledged. And it can actually be, there's an option to move it on the screen. So if you want to kind of drag and drop it, if you will, to a different part of your screen, you can do that as well. And the same goes with the quarter screen pop-up. There's a couple of different sizes that you can deliver the quarter screen pop-up, but again, it offers the ability to acknowledge. For our mobile applications, it comes across as a simple web push, so dependent on your end device, how that notification gets displayed on your screen is based upon that. And again, it's simple, just acknowledgement.
Thank you. Does the Cisco interface require single wire Informacast or Informacast licenses, or is it separate from their product? Will the devices work with Informacast?
Okay, great question. So we work independent of Informacast. We can also work in parallel with Informacast. Actually, what we do is we've integrated with Cisco's Open API, and we create a Java telephony API interface with the CTI manager. And what we're doing in that case is that we're leveraging some of the capabilities that Cisco offers to their devices. And in our case specifically, we have the ability to send a title of a message body, and also a WAV file. So as far as working in tandem with Informacast, we do perform a couple of different features that Informacast leverages on the device of the call man or the Cisco call manager, but we can also work in tandem with it. So if you're an organization and want to have both, you can still use both.
Thank you. Referencing the AED cabinets, would that require hardwire or could it be wireless?
That's an interesting scenario. So I'm assuming, if I'm interpreting the question properly, is that if someone were to open an AED cabinet, they want a message to go across their network. So what I would recommend in that particular situation is we could potentially put a sensor on that door that would initiate a contact closure that would connect to one of our alert beacons. Now, that alert beacon could be connected to the network via Ethernet or PoE cable, or you could have a Wi-Fi enabled beacon. If you did require a truly wireless solution in that scenario, we potentially could install a wireless fob in that where someone could press that in the event of emergency.
Can you do speech to text to have digital signage track any announcements on the PA?
Again, I'm going to try to interpret this question properly. I'm assuming that if you had a standard PA and someone were to pick up a handset and voice into that, you would want that voice to be translated into text to be displayed over the digital signage. What we would do is we would actually, instead of using that voice from the PA for the digital signage, we would actually initiate that from one of the other initiating points from the Alertus solution and do a text-to-speech over the PA along with standard text to the digital signage, just so that it would have a kind of a more cohesive solution in that manner. We do have kind of we utilize on the mobile device, if you wanted to send voice to text. So if you use the microphone on the Alertus mobile app to send a notification, we could capture that voice on that medium.
Is the audio transmitted via SIP?
So we actually have a couple of different solutions. If you have a SIP network, what we're doing is we're actually sending out a multicast audio message to those. So we're using like a standard multicast address like 224.0.0.1, something like that, or a multicast address that you would define on your network.
What is the decibel level of the notification devices? Is it over 85 decibels for manufacturing?
Great question. So the alert beacon itself has a couple of different modes that you can enable. In the configuration itself, you can choose the level of audio notification on the alert beacon. Its highest is 106 decibels. We also have another peripheral to the alert beacon that we can add, which is the horn strobe, and that can get up to 120 decibels.
Is the scrolling ticker an RSS feed?
No, actually, we're utilizing on the desktop notification, we have a .NET architecture, but if you require an RSS feed in your organization, the Alertus server has the ability to generate an RSS feed to be ingested by another source.
In the college environment, can students be batch loaded or must they download an app?
So for the mobile application, there's a couple of different ways that we can do that. We do integrate with LDAP on the Alertus server, but on the mobile side, we would recommend that they would either go to their respective app store, or you could create a link on your student portal for them to download that on their devices.
If we have several panic buttons in multiple locations, could each button generate a separate message?
Yes. For each location that you have a panic button, each one could have its own unique behavior defined on the organization and your scenario need.
Does Alertus integrate with Genetec? If so, at what capacity?
I'd have to do some discovery on Genetec to find out what vendor they are. Now, I will say that with the design of Alertus, we have a couple of different ways that we can leverage other third-party vendor applications. We have the ability to, as I mentioned earlier, create RSS. We have the ability to create cap feeds. We have the ability to create HTTP requests, and we also have the ability to ingest things from other sources in those same data formats. We also have the ability to control and monitor contact closure. So there's a couple of different ways, and depending on the scenario that you need implementation, we do also provide two APIs. We have a SOAP API and a REST API that we could potentially integrate into a third-party vendor solution.
How do you control who has access to initiate an alert?
That's really based on the organization. A couple of different ways you can do that is, we mentioned briefly a little bit earlier on the LDAP connectivity. The Alertus server has the ability to leverage your LDAP, and you can create specific user groups within that. You can create admin user groups or admin or user groups for that, depending on the access. If you wanted to create a dispatch group for individuals that just wanted to have dispatch. The Alertus server has the ability to create separate user roles and restrictions based on the level of access that you need for delivering information on the server.
Does Alertus integrate with Avaya phones or only Cisco?
We actually also have an API integration with Avaya as well. Avaya, like Cisco, has a list of devices and capabilities that it can leverage using the API. So yes, we have the ability to integrate with both Avaya and Cisco. We also have the ability to integrate with other third-party SIP servers if they have the ability to subscribe third-party SIP devices, and they have the ability to have paging groups.
Thank you. We have now concluded our Q&A session of our presentation. Again, if we did not get to your question, we will directly reach out to you with an answer. If you have any questions or need additional information, please feel free to email marketing@alertus.com, and we will be happy to assist. If you're looking for more information on Alertus and our solutions, visit our website, www.alertus.com. If you're interested in upcoming webinars, please visit www.alertus.com/webinars to see the full schedule. Also, register today to join us for our next webinar, Revolutionizing Your Desk Phone for Emergency Communication, on June 20th. Thank you for joining today's webinar, and we look forward to meeting you again soon.